Our next lesson in Chapter 5 is on using congruent triangles. We'll identify and use corresponding parts and use the third angle theorem. Properties of triangle congruence include reflexive property, the symmetric property, and the transitive property. Each of these are outlined on the page. The third angles theorem states if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles are also congruent. In our first example, we write a congruent statement for the triangle. Identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts. So a congruent statement is triangle what is congruent to triangle what. So we need to fill in what's congruent. We base that on the markings on the picture. So in my picture, we have triangle. We can write this many ways, by the way, depending on what we start with. I'm going to use M, then N, then P is congruent to triangle. I'm going to watch my markings. I went from 2 to 3 to 1 marking. So I have to do the same thing here, 2 to 3 to 1 marking. So that'd be Y, X, Z. Order is important on these because it tells us what matches what. The order of the lettering I chose should tell me then what angles match up. So according to what I wrote, angle M should be congruent to Y, and it is. Angle N is congruent to angle X, and angle P is congruent to angle Z. If you look at the picture, that's how it's marked. For the sides, you have to also be careful on the order. So MN is congruent to YX, NP is congruent to XZ, and MP, the third side, is congruent to YZ. Make sure your order of lettering matches everything up. In our next example, we're going to find some values. Find the value of X and the value of Y from the diagram. We look to see what matches according to what they have given us in the problem that's congruent. So to find X, we have to figure out what MQ is congruent to ED. Look at the order of your lettering on the top to help you. So X minus 2 has to equal 8. That's easy, one-step equation for us to solve. X equals 10. To find Y, we have to match up angle P, which is congruent to angle G. So 3X plus 2Y equals 84. X was 10, so 30. 3 times 10 is 30, plus 2Y equals 84. Subtract 30 from both sides. 2Y equals 54. Divide by 2. Y equals 27. And X was equal to 10. Show that the triangles ABD is congruent to CDB. Explain your reasoning. Here's what we know by the third angle theorem. The other two angles, angle ADB CB is congruent to angle CBD. I'll mark that on my picture. And then we still need a side. So by reflexive property, and this is what we'll always use for a common side, BD is congruent to BD. Therefore, we have all the parts congruent, so the triangles are congruent. In our next example, we're going to find the measure of angle P. Angle A is congruent to angle R. We know we've used 90 degrees. The total is 180, so 90 minus 52 leaves us with 38 degrees for angle P. In our last example, we're showing that the triangles are again congruent. We already have the three sides marked congruent. We know that by vertical angles, or the vertical angle theorem, that those two angles I just marked are congruent. Therefore, angle WYX is congruent to angle ZYV. Then by the third angle theorem, the other two angles, angle W is congruent to angle Z. Since we have all three sides and all three angles marked congruent, the triangles are once again congruent.